Good afternoon, and welcome back to one of our nature talks. My name is Josh Reichert, and I serve here at Spruce Lake as our Wilderness Camp Director. Today we're back in our nature center, and we're going to look at some of our creatures that we have here. Today we're going to focus on some of our geckos. We actually have two different species of geckos here, and the first one is our crested gecko. We'll get him on out. Now you'll see this little guy looks a little odd because he doesn't have a tail. One cool thing about crested geckos is that they can lose their tail, but if they do that, it won't grow back. So he's fine, doesn't have an issue in life, but for him, he just doesn't have a tail. Now these guys natively are found in New Caledonia, and they live in the tropics there. So they like warmer, humid climates, and they would live in like a rainforest. And so even though his colors look kind of odd here in like Pennsylvania, in that environment, he would blend in really well. One unique thing about these guys, and I don't know how well you'll see it on the camera, maybe we'll be able to zoom in on him a little bit, is his feet look more like pads or like he's wearing gloves. And that's the unique thing about crested geckos is on those feet, on the bottom sides, if you were to look at them under a microscope, you would see they have millions of hair-like scales that allow them to cling to things through static electricity. So if you've ever seen geckos run up a wall, that's what that is happening, just like this guy. So he can climb up smooth surfaces, no problem. He tries to climb up his cage and get out all the time. Now, another unique thing about crested geckos is they're omnivores. And so what that means is they both eat insects and then also fruit and vegetables. And primarily what this guy eats here at the Nature Center is a powder we mix with water, and it's flavored like mango. So that's what he eats. Sometimes we'll feed him crickets and things, but he actually prefers that vitamin mixture with the water. So you'll see him, he's pretty cool. We'll put him away and then we'll get out our next friend to look at. Now this guy is one we've had for a while. His name is Leo, and you might have met him when you've been here before. He's a leopard gecko, and leopard geckos come more from like the Middle East. You might find them in like Afghanistan, some parts of India, so they like it hot and more of like a desert, arid kind of environment. Now, he does not have the pads on his feet like we saw with that crested gecko, so he cannot walk up smooth surfaces like he can. He mostly just runs around on the ground. Now, his coloration is kind of unique and it looks really cool, and that's where he gets his name as far as a leopard, but it's also kind of like a camouflage. It helps him blend in on the desert floor. He breaks his body up in patterns so it's harder for animals to see him. This is what would be considered like a normal. This would be what they normally look like if you were to find one in the wild. Now, we're fortunate enough that we actually have another leopard gecko that we've gotten recently. We'll get her out. You'll notice she's a very different color than Leo. She's a little bit brighter, has more like the reds and pinks, those type of colors, and less of the yellows and the oranges. She would be considered like a color morph or something that'd be special that people bred different ones together to get this as a pet. Now, all of these geckos actually make great pets. So this is something, if you want to get a reptile, these would be good things for you to look at. Now, one unique thing about her and Leo, they have tails, unlike our first little friend, the crested gecko. Another unique thing about leopard geckos is they have the ability to lose their tail or drop their tail. What basically happens is if they're afraid, like an animal's trying to bite them or eat them, or they get excited or nervous because maybe someone's holding them and they like pull on it, they can actually have the tail fall off, which I think is pretty amazing to think about because you'll notice on her tail and then also on Leo's tail, it's pretty big. It's a big part of their body, but in a fraction of a second, it can then drop that tail, it falls off, and not only does it fall off, it actually will keep wiggling around. So what will happen is the animal that might be attacking it thinks the tail's still alive and tries to eat the tail, and the gecko is able to run away. The other neat thing about this process for these guys is they'll do that, and then about 9 weeks later, they'll grow their tail back, and they'll have a new one. One unique thing also about their tail, you'll notice how it's nice and fat. That's because that's where they store water and fat, kind of like you think of like a camel stores water. These guys will do that, and that's how you know these geckos are very healthy. We fed them really well. One thing, as we looked at these geckos today, I think it's neat to think about what God has done for them so that they can live where they live. Now, I don't think any of them think about that very much. They just kind of survive. Whether it's the crested gecko walking up smooth surfaces and being able to hide from animals, or the leopard geckos being able to lose their tail so that they can survive when they get attacked by an animal, they don't think about that. And I would think about, most of us don't often think about what God's done for us to help us survive. But I want us to look at a scripture reference that talks a little bit about something that God has done for us that helps us. This reference comes from Luke. It's chapter 12, verse 24. Consider the ravens, they neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouses nor barns, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than those birds? And you might be like, what does that mean? Well, it's first talking about how the birds and animals don't think about finding their food, right? They don't have like big places to store it. Like we would have like factories that produce things and then warehouses where it's stored. And then maybe in your refrigerator you have a lot. They don't do that. Some animals will hide some, but not like we do. But then it goes on to say that God provides for them. He gives them everything they need and they don't have to be worried about it. And so I think it's neat for us to think about, what does God give to you that you don't even think about sometimes? How has God provided for you? Especially in this crazy time, what are things that God has done for you throughout it? And so I want us to think a little bit more about that today, and for each of you to maybe take some time and thank God for what he's provided for you, how he's given you the things you need, just like he's given these geckos special things to help them survive. Well, we hope you have enjoyed another nature talk with us, and tune in next week to see what we have for you.